Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to talk about the June 27th balance update preview, and I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of condition virtuoso in player versus environment, specifically in raids and strike missions, because these game modes are what I mainly play, and this is where my main area of expertise is. Now, if you're interested in player versus player or world versus world analysis, you should probably watch a different video that focuses on those aspects. It's very important to understand in Guild Wars 2 that changes have effects in different contexts. And we're looking at player versus environment, raids, and strikes, and not more than that. And so if you want to play Condition Virtuoso in story missions, for example, you should be very critical of what I'm saying here, because it might not always apply to you, what I'm going to say. This is just something to keep in mind when we go over this. I'm not going to talk about many general things, but I think these two changes are still worth talking about, even though they're not that important for Condition Virtuoso. So the first thing is they are going to always give you the benefit from flanking or striking from behind when hitting defiant foes. Now, this is a change one can think is a good idea. Personally, I'm not 100% sure if I like it. However, there's one very concerning thing, and they've started this a few months ago, actually. In particular, making exceptions for defiant foes. Now, defiant foes are just enemies that have a break bar that is locked, or it doesn't need to be locked. Like, it can also be active, of course. But these are the defiant foes, like it's champions, legendary monsters, and raid bosses and strike bosses. So sounds good, right? However, this is not actually how it works. The problem is not all raid bosses are defiant. Conjured Amalgamate, the first boss in Wing 6, is not a defiant foe. Neither is Deimos at 10% health, like in the Underworld. And neither is Harvest Temple, the Dragon Void. And these are not defiant foes. As a result, now we have a build like Hammer Spellbreaker, which greatly benefits from striking defiant foes. And in these fights, it's just going to be super useless with the hammer and the defense straight line, because the bosses don't qualify as defiant. And there's no hope that Arenanet will ever change it, because I'm not sure they understand that these bosses are not actually defiant foes. So yeah, and now they're introducing one more source. Flanking Deimos at 10% or Conjured Amalgamate and the Dragon Void. Flanking is not that much of an issue, because the dragons and these bosses are actually facing away from the players already, facing to the side. You just need to know which side. But still, it's not something that's intuitive, and I don't like this distinction being cemented as long as not all raid bosses are actually counting properly as defiant foes. So yeah, I hope Arenanet fixes that or addresses that at some point, but my hopes are very low. Then confusion damage has been adjusted as follows. The damage over time is increased. If it was a 6 here, 0.06, it would be as strong as bleeding. Now it's slightly weaker than bleeding, and together with the damage on skill activation, it makes it roughly the same as bleeding. So yeah, I'm personally not a fan of it, because it's going to kill the incentive to play Mirage on certain bosses, and I liked Mirage. For Condition Virtuoso, which we're going to focus on here, it's not actually relevant. We're gaining a bit of damage on the golem, but we're losing that damage again against enemies that attack more than one time every 3 seconds. So yeah, plus minus 0, to be honest. Don't concern yourself with that stuff. Now we are going to talk about Mesmer. Before we can jump to the Virtuoso changes, we have to talk about one change, Signet of Humility, that is the Elite Signet. It does 600 break bar damage because it counts as a 6-second stun against enemies with Defiance bars. Has its cooldown cut in half. This is a huge buff that we didn't need at all, but I'm going to take it. This means that we can now use Signal of Humility into almost every breakbar there is. So yeah, pretty good. And we definitely didn't need that buff, didn't ask for it. But let Arenanet do their buffs, I guess. These two changes read impactful. They are actually directed towards World versus World, which I know nothing about. In practice, in raids and strikes, this has no impact whatsoever. Temporal Curtain is the focus 4 pull. This is the range reduced on the placement of the curtain. It's not the range reduced on the pull. So you're not going to notice this in any scenario. And these other changes are PvP focused. We don't care about it. I said we're going to talk about Virtuoso, but just one thing. This change is absolutely stupid. Like in the same patch that they're nerfing Confusion for Mirage, they're also killing its bleeding and torment output. Like, this is just stupid. Yes, Stacks Mirage was strong, but this is not the way to handle it. Stacks Mirage as a DPS build is perfectly fine. The problem is the alacrity output. And even that, whether that was a problem in the last patch is even questionable. But this completely makes it pointless to play Staff Mirage, to be honest. It's just not worth the effort to put in. Like, you have all these drawbacks in design because you can't maintain alacrity in split phases once your clones are dead. And now you also don't do damage anymore. It's really disappointing direction for Arenanet to take on Mirage. But let's hope that they realize what they've done once nobody plays it anymore, I guess. Okay, let's talk about Virtuoso, because Virtuoso is a bit more positive, maybe. Here they're removing defensive capabilities. That was their stated goal. And I think that they also saw that in PvE it's a bit broken to have Bladesong Distortion at 5 seconds if you have 5 blades. It's a reduction to 3.75 seconds at 5 blades. And that's still very strong. Don't worry about your safety as a condition virtuoso. You're still having the same amount of ridiculous self-heal. And you still have a very long duration of the distortion. Since you're shattering it with 5 blades anyway, this was never a problem. Like, you never needed 5 seconds of distortion anyway. So yeah, this change is absolutely deserved. Don't worry about it. Bladeturn Requiem, this skill no longer blocks incoming attacks. Now this is a bit, like, people complain about it a lot. I think many of them are complaining about it from a PvP context, which is perfectly fair to complain about. But for player versus environment, especially raids and strike missions, this is not as impactful as it sounds. Don't get me wrong here. It's a nerf to no longer be able to block with it. However, if you have a mechanic in raids that is very dangerous where you need a block, like Gorseval, the slam down, you would want a block or stability. The fear on Slothosaur, you would probably want a block, and so on. If you have these mechanics that you need to block, then a personal block is not actually useful, because unless everyone is a condition virtuoso and can just use blades on Bladeturn Requiem to have a channel block, unless everyone has a self block, you will need a group solution. So what you do in a squad is you will get a group solution. You will get a firebrand with stand your ground, you get a firebrand with advance, or a mechanist that gives aegis and stability. You will get something that solves the problem for the entire group, because the group is as strong as the weakest link in that sense. So the ability to block for yourself is not as impactful as it looks here. And so yeah, again, there are situations where having a block is good, and you will notice that this is a nerf, but it's not the end of the world, especially considering if you take a look at the history of Condition Virtuoso, we started with only the block from this, and Bladesong Distortion didn't actually exist at the start. And now we have Bladesong Distortion, which is way better than blocking in most situations. and we no longer have to block. So the defensive capabilities now are better than they were a year ago, for example. So yeah. As I said, this is really from a raiding and strike missions perspective, where you have a healer who takes care of your defenses and so on. So obviously in solo play, losing this block is worse for you. And if you are interested in solo play analysis, you should probably watch an analysis that focuses on that. We're really sticking to the situation where we have healers and group compositions and work together to solve a problem. And there, the individuality of the skill was never that valuable to begin with. Okay, with these nerfs to the defensive capabilities comes actually a few changes to other skills. Let's quickly address these here. We never wanted this skill to begin with. This is the heal skill from the Virtuoso. It's nice that it gets buffed a bit, but yeah, we're not taking it anyway, on condition Virtuoso at least. This here, okay. Blade renewal, reduce channel duration from 3 seconds to 2 seconds. This is a distortion again. Now the distortion is shorter, but it gains us our blades faster. It's very rare that you want this in raids anyway. So yeah. Okay, it's net 0 change basically. Distortion is a bit shorter, but you get the blade faster. Doesn't really matter. We didn't take this trait, and we're not playing PvP. So now let's talk about the 2 remaining changes. And first we talk about Bladecall. This might be a bit confusing, but the way Bladecall works right now is like a boomerang, where the blades will fired and then they will return to you. That means you need to keep the target between you and the blades you've thrown out. And this on the golem, obviously you can always perfectly hit. You can always perfectly hit 6 times with it. 3 times go on the way out, 3 times on the way back. But in raid bosses, especially when raid bosses move, this was actually very difficult to consistently hit. And if you take a look at logs, you see that many people only have 5 hits on average with the skill in many raid bosses that move. And so this is a direct buff to the damage potential of Condition Virtuoso on raid bosses. And this is certainly a good thing. I've made a video on the difficulty of and importance of hitting your skills as Condition Virtuoso, and where we also talk about Bladecall. And this is a change that I wish, that I've always hoped that would happen. So yeah, this is really cool. But there's something maybe worth talking about if you can take a look at the stream. Does he hover the tooltip? Yes, he does. Okay, you see that the outgoing damage is very low and the returning damage is very high. As it is right now, your daggers always do the same damage on the way out and on the way back. So this might be a PvP thing. I don't actually know. But overall, there's 2 things to say here for PvE. They didn't say that they want to nerf this skill, or they also didn't say that they want to buff it. Like, I fully expect that the damage overall after this change comes through is going to be exactly the same. So no matter how this stacks up in the end in PvE, how it's distributed, the total damage of the skill will be the same. So I wouldn't worry about damage reduction or damage gains here. Take it at ±0. But one thing that's important to understand for Condition Virtuoso is that the strike damage is a very unimportant part of the skill. What's more important is the number of hits we're getting in. Because you can see this is a blade attack, and every time a blade attack hits, we inflict 1 stack of bleeding for 10 seconds. And so we get 6 stacks of bleeding if this fully hits, and this is the majority of the damage that the skill does. So the fact that this change allows you to consistently hit 6 times is way more important than any reshuffling they do with these strike damage values here. And this is something that will be important when we take a look at the unstable Bladestorm, our Dagger 3. Let's take a look at the notes. This skill is now a ground-targeted spell instead of a projectile. Spell strikes enemies in range in addition to firing projectiles at nearby enemies. This is concerning. And the reason it's concerning, I'm going to show it to you. We will take a look when he uses the skill. You can see how often it's going to hit. And then I'm going to show you how it works currently. And we're going to see what the difference is about. Okay, all right. So he places down the Dagger 3 AoE here. And if you count the damage numbers that pop up on the medium golem here, you will actually see double numbers popping up each time. So this means that this skill, it has a storm component and a blade component. The storm is the static AoE that happened there, the weak one, and the blade damage that fired out is the strong one. I know they want to revert that for PvE, so the storm damage is the strong one and the blade damage is the weak one. But still, it launches, it lasts for 4 seconds. It launches 4 blades that go out. And it also does the storm damage 4 times. And it's a blade attack. Means a condition Virtuoso is going to get 8 bleed stacks from this. 8. And it's completely irrelevant what the strike damage balancing is going to be. We're going to get 8 bleeding stacks out of a skill with a 12-second cooldown. And a very, very short cast time. It's less than half a second, actually. And what this means, I think I can show it best if I show you in-game. If I can log in very quickly. I can show it to you in-game. Right now, what it looks like. Because right now, we're going to hit actually only 3 times. Please spawn my golem. Okay. Now, if you use this skill, stand in front of the golem, we have 1 initial hit, a second hit, and a third hit. As you can see, 1 was strong and 2 were rather weak. And after the patch, we are going to be able to place it on top of the kitty golem and get 8 hits out. And that's concerning because it's going to, the value of this skill is going to go shoot through the roof, actually. Like, it does a certain amount of total damage. The total damage is still going to be fine, but combined with the extremely short cast time, it's actually more efficient to cast this than your Phantasm. It's literally going to be, it's actually even going to be better than your F1 Shatter. I think it's equal to the F2 Shatter. But this is just insane. We're getting 8 hits, 8 stacks of bleeding, 80 seconds of bleeding on just 1 skill. And the second part that is concerning, like, okay, they missed that interaction probably. Maybe they intended it as well, or they didn't care. But the second thing that's concerning is they're saying they launch blades 4 times. It already does that, but on a small golem, it doesn't actually hit that often. It only hits that much if you have a bigger golem like this. Now we have 4 hits. And we even have 5 hits right now. So they might think, oh, okay. We had an initial hit. And we have 4 blades that shoot out. And after the patch, we're going to have 4 pulsing hits and 4 blades that shoot out. So it's the same. But for PvE, this is absolutely not the same thing. As I said, we're going to go from 3 hits or 5 hits on giant hitbox to 8 hits. And this is just, it shows, I don't want to say like, it shows just that they don't really consider the game modes of raiding and strike missions when they make these balance changes. even though they probably care about PvE as well, they just don't consider the ramifications of some of these changes. And now you can say, obviously, only a minority of player is raiding. Only a minority of players actually cares about golem numbers or DPS numbers while raiding. But I would posit that also a very small minority cares about player versus environment, player versus player, and look at how much effort they're putting in to make sure that player versus player feels good for everyone. And I don't want to say like this is a good thing that Arenanet cares about small communities. It's just that the fact that they missed this thing, that this is just going to be absolutely busted after the patch. And I don't really have a way of providing feedback to them either. This is a bit frustrating to me as a play versus environment player who cares about damage numbers. Because I feel like Arenanet and also we as a community could gain a lot from having more direct conversations about these changes before they happen. Obviously, you can give feedback on the forums, but yeah, I feel like a lot of it also gets spammed and it doesn't really feel like they're going to listen to those comments. And yeah. So with that understood, let's wrap up what we have so far. We have that this thing is going to hit 8 times instead of 3 times. Currently, Condition Virtuoso has a benchmark of 38,103. And with this patch, it's just the Dagger 3 change alone is worth 1,400 DPS. So you can expect 39.5k right off the bat as the new benchmark. But that's only half the story because it's getting a lot more silly. Let's actually get out of the game again for a second. And I'm not going to play the audio of the stream, but when they say that, when they talk about the skill here, they're not actually, like, they're removing defensive capabilities. They're saying they're removing the channeled block. So of course, they're removing the channel from the skill. Now, what does that mean? This skill, the F5 shutter, has a 1.32 seconds channel right now. This is with quickness. So if we hop back into the game and give ourselves quickness, maybe. Let's get all boons. We're channeling for that channel time, and then it's going to send out rotating blades up to 5 times, inflicting 5 stacks of torment, 5 stacks of bleeding. Now they're removing the channeled block, and they said on the stream that they're removing the channel time from it. As I understand this means that it's still going to do 5 pulses, because the 5 pulses are actually related to the number of blades you use. They have nothing to do with the cast time, or with the channel time. They removed the channel time, so now it's an instant cast ability. And what this means is that we get an instant cast ability that does like 30,000 damage. And I don't know about you, but we're going from a fairly mediocre skill that does 30,000 damage at a 1.3 second cast time. This is slightly better than auto-attacking, but it's really not a huge priority. If you watch my guides that explain simpler versions of this build, you're not actually using this channeled block because, well, it's not worth that much. But if this ends up actually doing five blade attacks, having no cast time, as they've said, they removed the channel time, this is going to be insane. 30k damage as an instant cast ability. Just for the sake of, if you're still counting, so we are at the 39.5k benchmark right now. If you use the same rotation as we're using right now on the benchmark, And just consider the fact that instead of standing still for 1.3 seconds when channeling this, we're going to auto-attack during that time. We can't do that right now because we're idle, but after the patch, we could do the same rotation and just fill the time with auto-attacks. That already is going to be plus 800 or plus 900 DPS. So we are looking at a 40.4k bench. And right now, we're not prioritizing this skill because, well, it's rather mediocre, right? We're using it only 4 times across the benchmark. But if we are actually careful about when we use it, we could up this to up to 6 or 7 times even over the period of the benchmark. And then stacking all of that up, we can look at breaking 41k certainly, maybe 41.5k even. So they're removing defensive tools in this patch. And for good reason, to be honest, because distortion is absolutely broken. But if they do it by removing the channel time here and leaving it as instant cast, which right now it is instant cast in the sense that, well, it really has only this channel time. If they're removing that with the block and keeping the pulsing damage, Condition Virtuoso is going to be absolutely broken. And I'm honestly shocked that not more people are talking about this. There's a lot of talk about Condition Virtuoso being bad or Virtuoso being badly hit by the removal of the block, or maybe even people not liking the Dagger 3 change. But for Condition Virtuoso, these changes, even though no numbers are being touched here, remember, these changes are absolutely massive. And we're going to have a huge increase in DPS, maybe 3k DPS better. We're going to be up with the best classes on the patch, all the while having an absolutely easy rotation to play. And except for this shatter, everything is going to be ranged, basically. Very easy to play, as I've said. And it's super safe with distortion, with strong lifesteal from Jagged Mind. And the damage is just going to go through the roof. Actually, there's one build where you don't play with dueling and phantasms. You instead play with the chaos straight line and entirely different gear. That build can also look forward to a 40k benchmark. And that build is going to do little more than auto-attacking, which is honestly broken. And what frustrates me, again, I'm repeating myself here, is that these changes, like I can watch the patch preview and I can have these concerns, but there's no real way to have an engaging discussion with Arenanet about it. I'm not sure if they're aware of the build existing in the first place. Are they aware of these problems or are they not aware of them? Are they just going to run into this patch head first and we'll have a time where Condition Virtuoso is more prevalent than ever? Even now, most people are playing this class. And after the patch, it's just going to get buffed. Like, I would really like it if there was a more clear-cut path to talk to Arenanet about changes, and if they got actual feedback from players who know a lot about these specs. I happen to know a lot about Condition Virtuoso, and I could tell them from this patch preview that some of these changes are not well thought out and unnecessary buffs. But as of now, I feel kind of powerless to prevent this patch from going live. So yeah, this is it for this summary. Maybe to wrap it up, and let's get back out of the game, back to the patch notes. So as I said, we're losing defensive capabilities. Losing the block is not that important in raids and strikes. It's very important for solo play. Those solo players are getting hurt by this. This is very good in practice. No change on the golem. This is going to be an absolutely insane DPS increase. Look forward to 39.5k at least on the golem. And the change, if this thing loses its cast time, as they've said in the stream, it's going to be absolutely broken. And I hope they reconsider some of these changes because they don't make sense in the context of Condition Virtuoso right now. Okay, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this lengthy rant about balance from me. I do not really edit this. I'm just going to upload this rant as it is. I hope it is still watchable, and I wish you a pleasant day.